Hi, this is Carl Walenskas of Smart Company Growth, and with us today on the Smart blog is Phil Montero of Montero Consulting, who has a website called You Can Work From Anywhere, this business website, and a blog, and it's all about the virtual operations of your office and setting up a remote situation where businesses can operate from anywhere on the road, and also there are established work teams that are on the road and remote workforce. Phil is the noted expert on that subject, and we're glad to have Phil here today. How you doing this morning, Phil?
I'm doing great, Carl. Thanks for having me on.
Phil, maybe you can just give us the quick, broad brush overview about Montero Consulting. What's the bread and butter that you get into?
Sure. We're basically an e-business consulting firm, and when I talk about e-business, really what I'm talking about is kind of the way that companies work today. There's been a lot of terminology tossed around, from virtual teams, distributed work, mobile work, telework. There's a lot of terms, but in my opinion, it's really just the way that most companies work today, especially small to medium-sized companies that are growing. It's very common for companies to have team members or employees that are working from multiple locations, maybe working virtually across distance and time. And most people are not working, even if you're just a solo professional or an entrepreneur, you're probably not working from the same location all the time. You work from coffee shops and meetings and client sites and hotels. And I think that a lot of companies struggle with how to do that because they didn't really have a planned approach. They kind of just stumbled into it. So basically what we do is I consult with companies. I basically do strategic consulting and help them look at the type of work they do, choose the best tools, and thoughtfully apply those tools to make sure that they can communicate and collaborate regardless of where they're working and be more flexible.
Phil, you and I have known each other now for probably about a month or a month and a half, and we've been talking about some different things, and you've been consulting with me to help me set up some of the things that I'm trying to do. One thing you might not know is I started off with a company when I got out of college called IBM. And that was a long time ago, longer than I'd like to.
Did you have a blue suit? Did you get to wear the blue suit?
I wore a blue suit, and I could wear the white shirt and a blue tie. But it was a very different company back then, and it was filled with brick and mortar operations. I happened to start off in Endicott at the original IBM Think building. I worked there for about 5 years, and then started to carve my niche when I left that company into smaller companies. But the interesting thing is, IBM is one of these companies right now who's totally changed their business model, and from what I understand has a tremendous amount, I mean tens of thousands of virtual employees who don't report to the office.
Yeah, they are a company I often cite when talking to larger companies about, someone that's really embraced this and done this properly with a strategic approach. And that's really the companies that benefit. When you hear people talking about struggling with virtual teams or that it's not working, I would almost bet you if you looked at most of those cases, it's because they kind of took an ad hoc approach and didn't take a strategic approach. IBM, on the other hand, has really embraced this. They've mobilized their managers and their workforce can work using some of their own tools and other tools that they've developed or brought in, and they let them work from wherever they want to work. And they found that it saves them money in real estate, increases in productivity, retention for employees, and being able to attract valuable talent. I mean, people really have a desire for that kind of flexibility in their workplace these days.
So the primary benefits, I mean, the importance of doing this right now for businesses is, you mentioned some rather obvious cost savings. As far as brick and mortar cost savings and using some of this remote technology, which keeps getting lower and lower every time you walk into Staples or
Sure.
Best Buy, you can get some of this technology that seems to be that off the shelf. What kind of trends are you seeing with virtual work these days in not only the large companies that we've talked about, the IBMs and the Intels, but the maybe some smaller mid-sized enterprises?
Yeah, well, I think what you're really seeing, I mean, first of all, the trend is obviously going in this direction. IDC, International Data Corp, released a study that they did, I think it was in February of last year, saying that the mobile workforce will grow to 1 billion by the end of this year and 1.2 billion by the end of 2013. So clearly, everybody, not everybody, but clearly a large portion of the working population is moving to be more mobile. And as you said, the thing that really excites me, because I work with a lot of small and mid-sized companies, is that a lot of the capabilities of what you can do these days are things that used to only be in the realm of possibility for larger organizations who had large IT staffs. And as you said, it's getting more affordable. And what I'm seeing is smaller companies now are able to, because of cloud computing, some of these web-based services or software as a service, SaaS, as some people talk about. I mean, the thought of being able to do a web meeting and share out your desktop and collaborate with a bunch of people and show slides used to be something that cost thousands and thousands of dollars and only larger corporations can do. And these days, there are free and low-cost tools that will allow you to do things like that. Remotely control your desktop, share files, and in real time, multiple people collaborating on a document in real time. These are very powerful tools, and they are now very affordable. Again, sometimes even free. Google has come out with so many great tools that the trend I'm seeing is more companies are able to embrace this and really change a true shift in the way they work.
I'm seeing it too. It's funny that you mentioned some of the tools. You and I just tested one the other day as far as the web meetings, and that was born out of necessity. As the purchase of DimDim, 3 days after I got into it, required me to go look at something else when Salesforce bought that out. But so you have to stay on top of it. The technologies come fast and furious, but they are out there. When if you're setting up remote teams for collaboration and so forth, I mean, I heard you talk about people complaining about if it's not working. What's the downside of doing it wrong? I mean, what costs don't you see?
Well, I think there's the cost is a huge communication breakdown and a productivity falls away. And it's funny because the same things that are the positives if it's done right become very much the other side, the yin to the yang there, the negatives if it's done wrong. And one thing is, one of the shifts that's important to make with this is from a management perspective. It's choosing the right tools. I always talk about choose the right tools and thoughtfully apply them. So you need to look at, as you said, there's so much technology. One of the first steps is choosing the right tools and settling on a core set of tools, making sure everyone knows how to use them. The other thing that where a lot of companies kind of fail, I think, is how to manage people that you don't see, and how do you build trust and keep communication flowing and keep everyone on the same page. Now, if you have a manager that typically struggles to manage people or has communication issues in the office, when those employees or those team members are suddenly remote, well, that's going to magnify that. Any problem you have that is a challenge when you're co-located, working together, gets magnified across distance. So I think, what you see is that these companies struggle because, again, they haven't gone in and either gotten the training or they haven't taken the time to take a step back and look at the right tools and make sure they apply them. So what you wind up seeing is lost productivity, poor communication breakdown, which then affects deadlines and project delivery. But those same things, when done strategically and done right, are the same upside. Suddenly you improve your communication because you're more conscious about how you communicate and you've put these new tools in place. Suddenly you have increased productivity because people don't have to wait till they get back to the office. They can access their information and tools and collaborate regardless of where they are or whether there's a time difference. You get increased project delivery because, again, everyone has rapid access to these tools. Everyone can get in, do what they need to do, and deliver a project on time. So it's kind of a two-headed coin there. If you do it right, you have all these benefits, but those same benefits become negatives if you don't take the right approach.
Leadership is something that I've made a study of over the course of my a couple of decades in my career, and it is interesting because it is a new paradigm out there. It's something. It's a little bit different to lead people that you don't see on a daily basis and keep them engaged. Do you have any tips? Maybe a couple, 3 tips. As far as leadership. Just from a broad perspective. What would be the most important things for say a smaller or mid-sized company venturing out into this brave new world of distributed work? And I'm not just talking about remote salespeople, but it could be development teams that are located on the far sides of the planet, with engineering in India and call centers in the Philippines. I mean, what would be a couple of quick tips?
Well, my first tip would be, and one thing I like to stress is, yes, it is a different paradigm, as you said, But in order to kind of take away some of the fear, because I think that's where a lot of companies don't embrace this because they're afraid of this management shift. A lot of it is small changes, small adjustments that lead to big results. And one of those things, is, as I mentioned before, is, and this would be my first tip, is communication is the key to everything. And so being what I call a conscious communicator is one of the main things that you need to do as a manager. When you have everyone in the office, you often don't think about the way that you're going to communicate. You don't necessarily have guidelines in place, and you pass somebody on the way to the water cooler, or you bump into them, or stick your head in their cubicle and talk. And so all of that stuff happens pretty organically. But one of the things I suggest people do, particularly when they're working across distance like that, is communicate about how you're going to communicate. Come up with some basic guidelines of, okay, well, we're going to use voicemail for this, and we're going to have this kind of turnaround time. If someone leaves you a voicemail, you should know that within 2 hours that will be responded to. When we're working on this type of thing, or we're having this kind of communication, we're going to use web meetings for that, or we're going to use instant messaging, or and to kind of look at those tools and come up with some guidelines about how to use them and what the turnaround time is, because that prevents or preempts some of these communication breakdowns that happen. And then also be more conscious about making sure everyone's included, that you pass along the information. Again, that stuff that you reach out to people, that happens so organically in the office, doesn't often happen across distance that way.